He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't chase you down the street or flood your phone with apologies. He smiled. He nodded. He said, "I understand." And that's how most people misunderstand loss. They think silence means peace, but silence is often the loudest bill a man will ever pay. Silence is the first language he speaks after losing you, not because he has mastered control, not because he is emotionally evolved, but because his system hasn't caught up to the reality yet. Shock doesn't scream, it freezes. When something valuable disappears suddenly, the mind goes numb before it feels pain. That numbness looks like composure from the outside. People assume he's handling it well. In truth, he's standing still internally while the world keeps moving around him. Silence becomes the pause between impact and understanding. In that silence, his thoughts don't line up neatly, they collide. One moment, he convinces himself it was necessary. The next, he feels a hollow pressure in his chest that has no name. Silence gives him time to process without committing to a story. Speaking would force clarity, and clarity would force responsibility. So he chooses quiet, not as a strategy, but as a reflex. When loss hits too fast, the mouth closes before the heart even knows what it has lost. Silence also protects him from questions he cannot answer yet. When people ask, "What happened?" he doesn't have a clean explanation. He hasn't sorted the details. He doesn't know where it broke. So he avoids conversations altogether, not because he doesn't want to talk, but because talking would expose how unfinished his understanding is. Silence becomes a buffer between his confusion and the expectations of others to explain it. What many mistake for emotional maturity is often emotional overload. Strength looks loud in movies, but in real life, it often looks like withdrawal. He doesn't argue. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't chase explanations. Instead, he pulls inward. His silence is not a declaration of independence. It's a sign that his inner world is recalibrating. When something meaningful is removed, the psyche needs time to reorient itself, and that reorientation happens quietly. Inside that silence, memory becomes relentless. Without conversation to distract him, moments replay without mercy. He remembers the small details he once ignored. The tone shifts, the pauses in conversation, the times he chose convenience over effort. Silence magnifies reflection. There is no external noise to dilute self-examination. And while this introspection can eventually lead to growth, at first it feels like being trapped in a room with nothing but mirrors. Silence also delays grief. It postpones it rather than eliminates it. He might function, laugh, even appear unaffected, but grief is patient. It waits for stillness. It waits for the moment when silence turns from numbness into awareness. That's when the cost begins to register. Silence was never strength, it was shock buying time. Time for reality to settle. Time for the weight of absence to finally land. Pride is the second shield he raises, and it's heavier than silence. Pride tells him that reaching out would make him look weak, that admitting loss would shrink his value. So he stands tall on the outside while something caves in on the inside. He convinces himself that dignity means restraint, that composure means control. What he doesn't realize yet is that pride doesn't heal wounds. It only hides them long enough for them to deepen. Pride whispers dangerous lies. It says, if she wanted to stay, she would have. It says, if you mattered, she'd come back on her own. So he does nothing. He waits. He pretends detachment, not because he lacks feeling, but because pride reframes vulnerability as humiliation. Admitting pain would mean admitting dependency, and pride can't not tolerate the idea that something or someone had that much influence over him. This pride makes him rewrite history. He minimizes what you meant. He downplays the loss in conversations. He jokes about it, shrugs it off, changes the subject. Each dismissal is an attempt to reclaim power. But power built on denial is fragile. Every time he says, "I'm good," when he isn't, pride tightens its grip, ensuring the pain stays unprocessed and unresolved. Pride also keeps him from asking the most important questions. Questions like, "Where did I fail?" Or "What could I have done differently?" Those questions require humility, and humility feels like surrender. So instead, pride encourages blame or detachment. It tells him it was mutual, inevitable, or unnecessary to dissect. But without honest reflection, lessons are delayed. Growth waits behind the door pride refuses to open. There's a quiet loneliness that comes with pride, because when you don't admit you're hurting, no one knows how to reach you. He isolates himself emotionally, even among friends. He becomes the man who handled it well, unaware that he has trained the world not to check on him. Pride earns him respect, but at the cost of connection. And respect is cold comfort at 2 a.m. Eventually, pride starts to crack, not loudly, but subtly. It shows up in the moments when he almost sends the message, but deletes it. When he rehearses what he'd say if he ever allowed himself honesty. When he feels the urge to apologize, not to win you back, but to free himself. Pride kept him quiet, yes, but it also delayed healing. And healing never begins with protecting the ego. It begins with lowering it. After silence and pride have done their work, he turns to routine, not out of joy, but out of necessity. Life has to keep moving. Bills have to be paid. Responsibilities demand attention. So he fills every corner of his day with motion, with tasks, with commitments that keep his mind from wandering to the space you once occupied. Mornings become mechanical. Coffee is drunk without taste. Work is completed without passion. Routine becomes a refuge, a way to survive without confronting the emptiness inside. In this refuge, he convinces himself that keeping busy equals moving on. Gym sessions, long drives, endless scrolling through screens. Anything that keeps the mind occupied becomes vital. There is a subtle comfort in motion. If he doesn't stop, he can't think too deeply. If he doesn't pause, the memories don't hit as hard. Yet the irony is cruel. The more he fills his time, the less he actually processes what's happened. He becomes productive but not present, active but not healed. Routine also becomes a form of control. After losing someone he cared about, the world feels unpredictable, fragile, chaotic. Filling hours with repetitive, measurable tasks gives the illusion of order. Making the bed, washing dishes, responding to emails, these small, controllable actions feel like stability when emotional stability is nowhere in sight. And in these small victories, he finds temporary relief, even though it doesn't touch the deeper wound. But routine cannot shield him completely. No matter how structured the day, certain triggers pierce the armor. A song on the radio, the smell of a familiar perfume, a joke that reminds him of you. These moments break through the carefully constructed schedule and leave him exposed. He can't plan against memory or emotion. Routine is only a barrier, not a cure. There is also a loneliness in this business that people rarely see. Surrounded by people, yet emotionally isolated, he performs life as if nothing happened. He smiles, he laughs, he answers questions. But beneath the surface, there is a persistent ache. Every accomplishment, every completed task is quietly measured against the absence of what he truly wanted. He learns that moving forward doesn't mean moving on. Finally, routine becomes a stage for reflection, even if he doesn't intend it. The silence between tasks, the pauses in the day, allow thoughts to sneak in. Unprocessed feelings, unresolved questions, and the gnawing regret all rise quietly during these moments. And slowly, without notice, routine starts to give him a framework to confront himself. It's not the loss that structures him, but the need to survive. In that structure, he will eventually meet his pain. and perhaps someday learn from it. Regret doesn't rush in with the immediacy of loss. It arrives quietly, like a shadow stretching across the floor at dusk. He might go weeks or months pretending everything is fine, immersing himself in work, routines, and distractions. But then, when life slows down, on a quiet Sunday morning, during a lonely drive, or in the middle of a sleepless night, regret appears without warning. It doesn't yell. It doesn't make a scene. It simply reminds him of everything he could have done differently. Regret is precise. It doesn't focus on abstract feelings. It homes in on missed opportunities, unsaid words, and choices left unmade. He remembers the apologies he never voiced, the small gestures he took for granted, the patience he failed to extend. Each memory strikes like a quiet accusation, not because anyone is blaming him, but because he finally sees his own failings with unfiltered clarity. And in that recognition, the weight of loss grows heavier than it ever did in silence or pride. It is in this stage that he realizes the cost of inaction. He recalls the moments when he could have stayed, fought, or simply listened more deeply, but didn't. He sees the conversations that ended too soon, the misunderstandings he refused to address, and the emotional walls he erected to protect himself. Each recollection stings with what ifs and if onlys. Regret is patient and cunning, waiting for life's quiet spaces to creep in where routine and pride cannot shield him. Regret is also deeply personal. No one else experiences it the way he does because it is tied to intimate knowledge of his own mistakes and shortcomings. Friends might notice he's distant or moody, but they cannot access the inventory of memories and choices that haunt him. Regret is private, invasive, and relentless, demanding acknowledgement even when he wishes it would vanish. It forces him to confront truths he had avoided with silence and distraction. Interestingly, regret is often accompanied by longing, not just for what was lost, but for the man he wishes he had been. It's not necessarily about winning someone back, but about imagining a version of himself that showed up better, loved more fully, and understood sooner. And this self-reflection, though painful, begins to plant the seeds of growth. Regret, while heavy and unforgiving, is a teacher he could not have met earlier in the process of loss. Finally, regret transforms him quietly in ways he may not even recognize at first. It reshapes priorities, redefines values, and forces a reckoning with past choices. What started as silent shock and proud avoidance now becomes the fuel for change. It's a late visitor, uninvited but necessary, a painful reminder that some lessons in love and loss can only be learned in hindsight, in solitude, and in the spaces where words were never spoken. It is in the hidden spaces, those quiet, lonely moments that nobody sees, that real growth begins. He has gone through the stages of shock, pride, routine, and regret, and now the raw truth of loss settles in. Pain, which he once tried to ignore, becomes unavoidable. It's not dramatic or performative. It's subtle, persistent, and intimate. And it is here, in this private confrontation with himself, that transformation begins. Growth doesn't happen in crowds, in arguments, or in attempts to prove strength. It happens in silence, in reflection, and in the willingness to face what he had long avoided. When pain is hidden, he starts seeing himself clearly. The distractions fall away, and he meets the man he was before you left. The one who could have done better, the one who allowed pride to cloud love, the one who avoided difficult conversations. No one else sees this version of him. It's only visible to himself. And this self-awareness, painful as it is, becomes the foundation for meaningful change. Growth always begins with honesty, and pain, when acknowledged, is the catalyst for that honesty. He learns to identify patterns, habits, and behaviors that contributed to the loss. He sees where he failed to communicate, where he let ego dictate choices, and where fear of vulnerability kept him from being fully present. These realizations are uncomfortable, sometimes unbearable, but they are necessary. Pain acts as a mirror, reflecting the parts of himself he might have ignored, excused, or justified. And only when he confronts these reflections does he start to rebuild himself with intention. Hidden pain also teaches resilience. Each memory he revisits, each moment of regret he endures becomes an opportunity to understand emotional endurance. He discovers that surviving loss is not about avoiding it, but about feeling it fully without being consumed by it. The quiet suffering he experiences teaches him patience, empathy, and emotional depth, qualities that cannot be learned in comfort or through avoidance. At the same time, this hidden growth teaches him to value presence and commitment. The lessons of absence are clearer than any words could ever convey. He begins to understand how important consistency, attention, and emotional investment are in relationships, not only romantic, but in friendships, family, and self-connection. Pain reveals priorities. It educates him on what truly matters when all distractions are stripped away. Finally, growth emerges in the form of subtle strength. It is not loud, boastful, or performative. It is quiet, deliberate, and enduring. He learns that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the willingness to face it. It's in these hidden chambers of reflection, where nobody witnesses his struggle, that he becomes a man capable of deeper love, wiser choices, and a more authentic life. Pain, once denied and hidden, transforms into a powerful teacher, shaping the man he was meant to be long after the loss. Loss has a way of teaching lessons that love alone could never deliver. When he was with you, love felt immediate, tangible, and sometimes even effortless. But love doesn't always force reflection. It often allows comfort to mask shortcomings. Loss, on the other hand, is unrelenting. It exposes the gaps he didn't see, the moments he took for granted, and the parts of himself he never confronted. In losing you, he learns what love, in all its presence, failed to teach: the weight of absence, the value of effort, and the cost of inaction. He realizes that love without accountability is fragile. In the relationship, he may have believed that his feelings alone were enough, that his affection, loyalty, or intentions guaranteed connection. But loss doesn't respond to intention. It responds to presence, consistency, and choice. The lessons he now carries are harsh, but clear. Caring isn't enough if actions don't match. Love, he learns too late, is a practice, not just a sentiment, and absence highlights where he failed to practice it fully. Loss also sharpens empathy in ways love never could. When someone leaves, he feels the emptiness not just for himself, but for the other person too. He begins to understand the quiet compromises, unspoken needs, and emotional investments that he might have overlooked. The absence of your voice, your presence, and your patience becomes a teacher in itself. Through loss, he learns to see love from the perspective of the one he hurt or neglected, gaining a depth of understanding that proximity and comfort could never reveal. Moreover, loss teaches humility. Pride and ego that once prevented growth are stripped away when he faces the truth of what he allowed to slip through his fingers. No amount of charm, confidence, or apology can instantly undo what has been lost. The lesson is stark: love is not about possession, and presence cannot be taken for granted. Humility emerges as he recognizes his limitations, his mistakes, and the consequences of taking love lightly. Even more profoundly, loss ignites reflection about his future relationships. He begins to see how he wants to show up differently next time, not out of fear, but out of understanding. Absence educates him on the importance of patience, communication, and action, lessons that love and comfort rarely enforces. It's in this way that losing you reshapes him. It molds his capacity to give, to prioritize, and to commit more fully, preparing him to become someone who values what he might once have overlooked. Finally, loss leaves an indelible mark on his character. What love couldn't instill, self-awareness, accountability, and the weight of true devotion, is now etched into him. He carries these lessons forward, not to reclaim what was lost, but to ensure that the next time love comes, he will recognize it, nurture it, and never take it for granted. In losing you, he pays the price silently, but he emerges with a wisdom that love alone could never have given him. And so, if you ever wonder whether he truly paid a price for losing you, know this: he paid in ways that no one could see. He paid in quiet nights, in routines that masked the ache, in pride that kept him from speaking, and in regrets that visited when life finally slowed. He paid in the lessons that only loss can teach, the lessons love alone could never force. He paid in silence, and silence, though invisible to the world, carries the heaviest cost of all. Loss may have taken you from him, but it left him with something far more lasting: the understanding of what love truly demands and the man he is becoming because of it.